Maduna decided very early that love was, at best, unreliable, and at worst, humiliating. At 19, she had believed in it with the kind of wholehearted certainty that only first love can inspire. He had been gentle, attentive, always laughing. Until one afternoon, she found out he had been sleeping with his best friend. Not behind her back in some complicated, emotional mess, but casually, as if it meant nothing at all. At 22, she tried again. This time she chose carefully. He was ambitious, charming in a calculated way, always talking about opportunities. She thought he was driven. She didn't realize she was part of the plan. When she overheard him joking with a colleague about how much someone like her could be worth to the right people, something inside her shut down completely. After that, Maduna stopped dating. By 27, she had built a quiet, controlled life. Work, home, occasional dinners with acquaintances she never let get too close. She was polite, composed, and entirely uninterested in anything resembling romance. Her mother, however, refused to accept this. "You can't live like this forever," she said one evening, placing a glossy brochure on the table. "Just try it." Dina didn't even look at it. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're alone." "I'm peaceful," Dina corrected. That argument ended the way it always did, with her mother sighing dramatically and Dina walking away. What she didn't know was that her mother had already registered her with a marriage agency. So when the call came, Dina almost hung up. "Miss Maduna, we have a client who is interested in meeting you." "I'm not interested," she replied flatly. "Please," the voice insisted gently. "Just one meeting. No pressure." Duna stared at the blank wall in front of her. One meeting meant nothing. One meeting could be endured. Fine. Jung Ki did not believe in love either, but for entirely different reasons. His marriage had been efficient, logical, a perfect arrangement orchestrated by his mother, a woman from a prestigious family, elegant and socially flawless. On paper, it had been ideal. In reality, it had been empty. He worked, constantly, late nights, early mornings, endless calls. He assumed that was enough, that providing stability was the same as building a relationship. It wasn't. When she cheated, she didn't cry or deny it. She simply said, "You were never really here." That sentence stayed with him longer than the marriage itself. After the divorce, his mother became relentless. "You need to remarry." "I don't," Junkie replied. "You will regret it." "I doubt it." Still, she arranged dates. Too many. And every woman he met reminded him of his ex, polished, practiced, distant in a way that felt dangerously familiar. So he made a decision. If this problem existed, he would solve it. He registered with a marriage agency himself, scrolling through profiles late at night like he reviewed business reports, methodically, critically. Then he saw her. Maduna. Her profile was different, minimal, no attempt to impress. No exaggerated hobbies, no carefully curated charm. Just a few simple facts and a photograph. She didn't smile in it. Not cold, not unfriendly, just uninterested. Junkie leaned back slightly. "She won't expect anything," he murmured. "No illusions, no emotional demands, no performance. Perfect." The day they met, neither of them was nervous. Duna arrived first, seated by the window, her posture relaxed but distant. She were something simple, unremarkable, deliberately so. Junkie recognized her immediately. She looked exactly like her photograph. He approached, stopping just short of the table. "Maduna." She glanced up. "Jung Junkie?" "Yes."
They sat. A brief silence settled between them. Not awkward, just neutral. Finally, Duna spoke. "Let's be honest. Why are you here?" Youngki didn't hesitate. "To solve a problem."
Her eyebrow lifted slightly.
"That's a new one. My mother wants me to remarry. I don't want complications."
"And
"You think I'm uncomplicated." "I think," he said evenly, "you're not pretending." That caught her attention. She studied him for a moment, sharper now. "And what makes you think that's a good thing?"
because I'm not pretending either."
Another silence, but this one felt different. Not empty, measured. Duna leaned back slightly, crossing her arms.
"I don't believe in relationships."
"Neither do I."
"I don't trust people."
I don't rely on them. She tilted her head. That sounds like a terrible foundation. It's honest. For the first time, something almost like amusement flickered across her face. So, what are you proposing? Junkie met her gaze steadily. A partnership. Clear terms. No expectations beyond what we agree on. No love? She asked. No pretense of it. No interference. Minimal. Duna let out a quiet breath, looking out the window for a moment. It was absurd. It was cold. It made more sense than anything she had heard in years. When she looked back at him, her expression had shifted, just slightly. All right, she said. Junkie blinked once. All right, one condition, she added. Go on. If either of us starts wanting something real, we end it. He nodded without hesitation. Agreed. They shook hands across the table. A contract, not a romance. And yet, as their hands parted, both of them felt it. Not warmth. Not hope. Just the faint, unsettling sense that something unpredictable had already begun. They didn't call it an engagement. There was no proposal, no ring, no carefully staged moment designed to impress anyone. Instead, there was a document. Clause 3, Duna said, flipping the page with disinterest. Separate finances. Agreed, Junkie replied without looking up from his tablet. Clause 5. No cohabitation required. We'll need shared appearances. For family events, she corrected. Not daily life. He paused, then nodded once. Acceptable. They sat across from each other in a quiet meeting room at the agency, not unlike two executives finalizing a merger. The consultant, who had introduced them, watched with barely concealed disbelief. Most couples argued over trivial things. These two negotiated like they were dividing a country. It took exactly 3 weeks. 3 weeks to formalize what most people spent years stumbling into. When Junkie informed his mother, she was stunned into silence for a full 10 seconds. You chose her yourself? Yes. No background concerns? No family. I checked. She frowned. And you're certain? Junkie's voice remained calm. Completely. What he didn't say was that her lack of background was precisely the point. Ma Duna did not belong to circles that required performance. She wasn't polished into artificial perfection. She wasn't waiting for him to fail her. She simply existed. And, strangely, that made her the safest choice. Duna's mother reacted very differently. You're getting married? She nearly shouted. It's not like that. It's exactly like that. It's an arrangement, Duna corrected, slipping off her shoes as if they were discussing grocery shopping. Her mother stared at her. Do you even like him? Duna paused. She considered the question carefully. I don't dislike him. That's not reassuring. It's enough, Duna said simply. And, for her, it was. They met twice a week after that. Not dates. Never dates. They called them alignment meetings. Sometimes at a cafe, sometimes in Junkie's office. Once, briefly, at her apartment, though she made it clear that was not to become a habit. They discussed schedules, expectations, boundaries. But gradually, something inconvenient started to happen. They talked. I don't understand, Junkie said one evening, setting his cup down. Why you stayed with the second one? Duna didn't flinch. I didn't know. You said you overheard him. I did. That's when I left. He studied her. You didn't suspect anything before that? She shook her head. I don't assume the worst in people. That seems inconsistent with your current stance. It is, she admitted calmly. I learned. Junkie leaned back slightly. I assumed my marriage was functional, he said after a moment. I didn't notice it was already over. Duna glanced at him. You were busy. That's not an excuse. No, she agreed. It's a reason. That lingered between them. Not judgment. Not sympathy. Just understanding. The first time they attended a family event together, everything nearly fell apart. Junki's mother had organized a formal dinner. Strategic, calculated, full of quiet scrutiny. Duna could feel it the moment she stepped into the room. The glances, the whispers, the polite smiles that didn't reach the eyes. She had expected this. It didn't bother her. What she didn't expect was Junki. He stayed close. Not possessive. Not performative. Just present. When someone made a thinly veiled comment about her background, he didn't raise his voice, but he responded. Firmly. Clearly. End of conversation. Duna noticed she didn't say anything. Later, outside, as the cool night air settled around them, she finally spoke. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. It doesn't affect me. It does, he replied. She looked at him, slightly puzzled. Why? Junki met her gaze, just as steady as always. But there was something new there, something less distant. Because you're my partner. The word landed strangely. Not heavy, not light. Just unfamiliar. Duna looked away first. Right, she said quietly. Things didn't change all at once. There were no dramatic shifts, no sudden realizations, just small inconsistencies in their carefully controlled arrangement. He started remembering how she took her coffee. She started asking if he had eaten. He adjusted his schedule slightly. She stayed a little longer than necessary. Once, then twice. Neither of them acknowledged it, because acknowledging it would mean one thing. And they had a clause against that. One evening, as they stood outside her building after another meeting, Junki spoke. We should review the agreement. Duna nodded. Any issues? Potential risks? She raised an eyebrow. That sounds serious. It is. A pause. Then, carefully, he said, we may need to define what qualifies as wanting something real. Duna went still. For the first time since they met, silence felt unstable. Why? She asked. Junki didn't look away. Because, he said, measured but unmistakably honest, we might be approaching it. The words hung in the air between them. Dangerous. Unplanned. Inevitable. Duna's expression didn't change, but her voice when she spoke was quieter than usual. Then we should be careful. Duna said it like a rule, like something that could still be controlled. Junki nodded, just once. Yes, but neither of them added anything after that. Because careful meant distance, and distance, suddenly, felt like a problem. Neither of them moved. Neither of them left. And for the first time, their perfectly constructed arrangement felt like something that could break. Not from failure, but from becoming something it was never meant to be. They didn't meet the next week. Not officially. No alignment meeting. No scheduled discussion. Just silence. Duna told herself it was good. Necessary. A correction. She went back to her routine. Work, home, quiet evenings. But something was off. She caught herself checking her phone. More than once. Annoyed, she turned it face down on the table. This is ridiculous, she muttered. It was just an arrangement. Nothing more. Junki handled it differently. He filled the space.
Longer hours, more meetings, more work.
Efficient. Productive.
Pointless.
At 11:47 p.m., he found himself staring at an email he had already read twice. Then, without thinking, he picked up his phone, paused, set it back down, picked it up again. "This is inefficient," he said under his breath. And then he called. Duna stared at the screen as it lit up. Jung Jung-ki. For a moment, she didn't move. Then she answered. "Yes?" A brief silence. "I think," he said, voice calm but not quite as steady as usual. "We're handling this incorrectly." Her grip tightened slightly on the phone. Handling what? The risk. Duna leaned back slowly. "You mean the part where we're supposed to end things?" "Yes." "And?" Another pause. Then, more quietly, "Avoiding each other doesn't reduce it." That made sense. She hated that it made sense. "So what do you suggest?" she asked. "We meet," he said. "As planned." That's the opposite of careful. "It's controlled," he replied. "We observe. Define the threshold." Duna closed her eyes briefly. This was absurd. They were trying to analyze something people usually fell into blindly. And yet. "Fine," she said. When they met again, something had changed. Not visibly. Nothing obvious. But the space between them felt charged. Like both of them were aware of it now, watching it, measuring it. "You've been working more," Duna noted, stirring her drink without looking at him. "Yes." "Why?" "Optimization." She glanced up. "That's not an answer." Jung-ki met her gaze. "It's avoidance." She stilled. "At least you're honest. You asked for that." "I did." A beat. Then she said, "I've been avoiding too. I assumed." That almost made her smile. Almost. They lasted exactly 23 minutes before the conversation derailed. It wasn't dramatic. It was simple. Dangerously simple. "Did you eat?" she asked. Jung-ki blinked once. "No." "Why not?" "I forgot." Duna exhaled softly, shaking her head. "That's not acceptable." There was a pause. Then Jung-ki said, very quietly, "You're concerned." She froze. "It's practical," she replied. "Is it?" "Yes." Another pause. Longer this time. Then, "You waited a week to hear my voice," he said. Her breath caught. "That's an assumption." "You answered on the first ring." Silence. Sharp. Exposed. Duna looked down at her cup, her fingers tightening slightly around it. "We're crossing the line," she said. Yes. Neither of them moved to fix it. The agreement had been clear. If either of them started wanting something real, they end it. That was the rule. The only rule that mattered. "Then we should stop," Duna said finally. The words felt heavier than they should have. Jung-ki didn't respond immediately. He watched her, carefully, like he was committing something to memory. "Do you want to?" he asked. The question landed harder than anything else. Because it wasn't about the agreement. It wasn't about logic. It was about choice. Duna opened her mouth. And stopped. For years, everything had been simple. Don't trust. Don't rely. Don't feel. But now, this wasn't betrayal. This wasn't manipulation. This wasn't performance. Him. Waiting.
I don't know, she admitted.
It was the most honest thing she had said in a long time. Junki nodded slowly. That's acceptable. She let out a quiet, shaky breath. It doesn't feel acceptable. No, he agreed. It doesn't. Another silence. But this one wasn't empty. It was full, unstable, alive. We made the rule, Duna said. Yes. We should follow it. Yes. Neither of them moved. Neither of them stood. Neither of them ended anything. After a long moment, Junki spoke. Then let's revise it. Duna looked up, startled. What? The agreement, he said calmly. It's no longer accurate. That's not how rules work. It is, he replied, if both parties agree. Her heart was beating faster now, annoyingly, noticeably. That's risky. Yes. That's exactly what we were trying to avoid. Yes. She stared at him. You're suggesting we... What? Continue? And just ignore the clause? No, Junki said. We replace it. With what? He held her gaze. And for the first time since she met him, there was no distance left in his voice. No automatic exit, he said. If it becomes real, we decide then. Duna's breath caught. That was worse. Infinitely worse. Because it meant staying. Choosing. Feeling. That's reckless, she whispered. Yes. A pause. Then, softer. But it's honest. Duna looked at him for a long time. At the man who had approached her like a solution. Who had treated their relationship like a contract. Who, now, was asking her to step into something undefined. Unprotected. Real. One revision, she said finally. Junki didn't look away. Name it. If this goes wrong, she said quietly, we don't pretend it didn't matter. Something shifted in his expression. Subtle, but unmistakable. Agreed, he said. No handshake this time. No document. No signatures. Just a quiet, mutual understanding. Far more dangerous than anything they had written before. And as they sat there, still too composed, still too careful, neither of them said it. But for the first time, they were no longer trying to avoid something real. They were walking straight toward it. They didn't call it love. Not at first. That would have required certainty, and neither Ma Duna nor Junki trusted certainty anymore. It started with time, not scheduled time, not alignment meetings, just time. Junki began showing up without a reason that could be written down. A message with no agenda. A call that wasn't about logistics. Duna noticed immediately. You're deviating from the structure, she said one evening, as he stood in her doorway, unannounced. Yes. That's inefficient. Yes. She looked at him for a long second. Come in. Her apartment became the place where things quietly shifted. At first, he sat on the edge of the couch, posture straight, like he might leave at any moment. By the third visit, his jacket was off. By the fifth, his phone stayed untouched on the table. By the seventh. You're staring, Duna said, without looking up from her book. I'm observing. That's the same thing. It's not. She turned a page. Then what's the difference? Junki considered that. Intent. That made her pause. Slowly, she lowered the book and looked at him. And what's your intent? For once. He didn't answer immediately. I haven't defined it yet, he admitted. Duna held his gaze. Something warm and unfamiliar settled quietly in her chest. That's new, she said. Yes. It wasn't dramatic. There were no grand confessions, just small, disarming moments. One night, it rained heavily. Duna hadn't expected him, so when the knock came, she hesitated before opening the door. Jung-ki stood there, slightly damp, hair darker from the rain. You didn't call, she said. I didn't plan this. Then why are you here? He looked at her, not distant, not analytical, just honest. I wanted to see you. The words landed softly, but they stayed. Duna stepped aside without another word. Later, the storm still echoing faintly outside, they sat closer than usual, not touching, but close enough that the space between them felt intentional. Your ex, Duna said quietly. Did you ever feel anything, even at the start? Jung-ki didn't deflect. What changed? I stopped paying attention, he said. And by the time I noticed, it was already gone. Duna absorbed that. I think mine was never real, she said after a moment. Just something I believed in. Jung-ki turned slightly toward her. And now? She hesitated. That question felt different now. I don't know what's real, she admitted. A beat. Then, more quietly. But this doesn't feel fake.
That was the closest they had come to saying it. And somehow, it was enough. The first time they touched, it wasn't planned. Of course it wasn't. It happened in the middle of something ordinary. Duna was reaching for her cup at the same time Jung-ki moved it closer to her. Their hands brushed. Simple. Accidental. But neither of them pulled away immediately. Duna felt it first. That instinct to retreat. To reset the distance. But Jung-ki didn't move. He just looked at her. Not questioning. Not pushing. Just there. Waiting. This is where it changes, she said softly. Yes. If we cross this, we can't go back to what it was. I know. Her fingers shifted slightly under his. Warm. Steady. Real. For a moment, she thought about everything that could go wrong. About betrayal. About loss. About that quiet, familiar disappointment she had built her life around avoiding. Then she thought about something else. About him showing up in the rain. About him staying. About him choosing. Not out of obligation. Not out of convenience. But because he wanted to. Duna exhaled slowly. You're still terrible at this, she murmured. Jung-ki's lips curved. Just slightly. I'm aware. But you're trying. Yes. She looked at him. Really looked at him. And this time she didn't look away first. That might be enough, she said. She turned her hand. Not pulling away. Holding his. The shift was quiet. Almost invisible. But absolute. Jung-ki's grip tightened just slightly. Not to hold her in place, but to meet her halfway. No hesitation. No calculation. Just presence. Neither of them rushed. Neither of them spoke. They just sat there, hands joined, the rain soft against the windows, the world outside distant and irrelevant. And for the first time, it didn't feel like a contract, or an arrangement, or something temporary waiting to break. It felt like something beginning. Beginnings, Duna realized, were quieter than endings. Endings shattered. Beginnings settled. After that night, nothing outwardly dramatic changed. They didn't suddenly become affectionate, didn't fall into easy laughter or casual intimacy like people who had always known how to love. They were still careful, still deliberate. But now, there was no pretending the line hadn't been crossed. Jung-ki didn't announce his visits anymore. He just came. And Duna stopped questioning it. One evening, he found her asleep on the couch, the lamp still on, a book half open in her hand. For a moment, he simply stood there, observing, but not in the way he used to. Before, he analyzed. Now, he noticed. The slight crease between her brows, even in sleep, the way her fingers were still loosely curled around the page, as if she hadn't meant to stop reading. He stepped closer, carefully took the book from her hand. She stirred. You came, she murmured, eyes still closed. Yes. She didn't open her eyes. Didn't sit up. Just shifted slightly, making space beside her. It wasn't an invitation spoken out loud, but it was clear. Young-ki hesitated. Not because he didn't understand, but because he did. This wasn't neutral anymore. This wasn't safe. Still, he sat. Slowly, carefully, close enough that their shoulders brushed. Duna leaned into it without thinking. Half asleep, unaware, trusting. That was what unsettled him. Not the closeness, not the contact, but the trust. His hand hovered for a moment before resting lightly against her arm. She didn't pull away, didn't tense, just settled further against him. Junkie exhaled quietly. This is new, he said under his breath. She fell asleep again like that. Against him. As if it were natural. As if it had always been this way. It wasn't. And that made it matter. The next morning, Duna woke first. For a brief second, she didn't move. Didn't open her eyes. Just felt it. The warmth. The steady rise and fall of his breathing. The unfamiliar, dangerous comfort of not being alone. Then reality caught up. Her eyes opened. Slowly, she became very aware of where she was. Of where he was. Of how close. Duna stiffened slightly. Not pulling away, but thinking. Too much. Junkie noticed immediately. You're awake. Yes. A pause. Neither of them moved. This complicates things, she said finally. Yes. But you didn't leave. No. Another pause. Her voice softened. Just a little. I didn't ask you to. No, he agreed. That hung between them. Not heavy. Not light. Just true. Duna turned her head slightly to look at him. Up close like this, he didn't look like the composed, controlled man everyone else saw. He looked tired. Real. Human in a way she hadn't let herself notice before. You stayed, she said again, quieter this time. Yes. Why? Junkie met her gaze. And for once, there was no careful phrasing. No strategy. I didn't want to leave you. The words landed differently now. Not like a statement. Not like a fact. But like something that had weight. Something that could change everything. Duna's chest tightened. Not painfully. Just sharply. That's dangerous, she whispered. Yes. Because it means something. Yes. Silence. But not avoidance. Not this time. She studied him for a long moment. Searching. For hesitation. For doubt. For anything that would make this easier to step away from. There was none. You're not good at protecting yourself, she said. Junkie's expression barely shifted. Neither are you. That's different. It isn't. Duna let out a quiet breath. Frustrated. Not at him. At herself. At this. At how something she had carefully avoided for years was unfolding anyway, quietly, steadily, without asking for permission. If this goes wrong, she said slowly, it won't be like before. No, he agreed. It'll matter. Yes. Her gaze didn't waver. Then why are you still here? Junkie didn't look away. Didn't hesitate. Didn't soften it. Because you matter. That did it. That was the moment. Not loud. Not dramatic. But irreversible. Duna felt it, clear and undeniable. That shift. That point where something stops being avoidable. Stops being theoretical. Becomes real. Her fingers moved slightly against his sleeve. A small motion. Barely noticeable. But intentional. Then stay, she said quietly. And this time, it wasn't part of any agreement. Not a revision. Not a condition. Just a choice. Junkie didn't answer right away. He didn't need to. He stayed. But staying, Duna realized, wasn't simple anymore. Not when everything had already shifted. Not when every quiet moment now carried weight. They didn't move for a while. Still too close. Still too aware. The morning light crept slowly across the room, soft and unforgiving in the way it revealed everything. Duna was the first to break the silence. This isn't what we planned. No, Junkie said. We were supposed to be controlled. We were. She let out a quiet breath. And now, Junkie looked at her, really looked at her. No control. That should have terrified her. For years, control had been everything. Distance. Boundaries. Safety. But right now, what unsettled her more was how little she wanted to go back. I don't like this, she said. Junkie's expression didn't change. Which part? She hesitated. Then, quietly. The part where I care. There it was. Not polished. Not softened. Just the truth. Junkie's hand shifted slightly, resting more firmly against hers. Then don't minimize it, he said. I'm not minimizing it, she replied. I'm questioning it. Why? Because the last time I trusted something like this, She stopped. Didn't finish. Didn't need to. Junkie's voice was lower now. That wasn't this. You don't know that. I do. She shook her head slightly. You can't guarantee that. No, he said. I can't. A pause. Then. But I can choose differently. Duna went still. What does that mean? Junkie didn't look away. It means I won't disappear into work and call it responsibility. Her breath caught slightly. It means I won't ignore you and assume you'll stay anyway. Closer now. Not physically, but something else. It means, he continued, steady and certain, if I'm here, then I'm here. The words settled deep. Not like a promise meant to impress. But Lee. A decision already made. Duna felt something tighten in her chest. Fragile. Terrifying. Real. You're making this very difficult, she said softly. I know. I was fine before. No, you weren't. She frowned slightly. You don't get to decide that. No, he agreed. But I can see it. She looked at him, long and searching. You think this is better? Yes. Why? Junkie didn't hesitate this time. Because you're not alone in it. That hit harder than anything else. Because it wasn't about romance. It wasn't about attraction. It was about something simpler. Something she had quietly lived without for years. Duna swallowed. Her voice, when it came, was quieter than before. I don't know how to do this. Junkie's hand tightened slightly around hers. Neither do I. A small pause. Then. We can learn. That should have sounded uncertain. It didn't. Duna let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. Her gaze dropped briefly to his hand, still holding hers. Still steady. Still there. This is the part where people say something important, she murmured. Yes. And ruin everything. Possibly. A faint, almost invisible smile touched his lips. She looked back up at him. Heart unsteady now. Then say it anyway. Silence. But not hesitation. Junkie held her gaze. No distance left. No calculation. I care about you. Simple. Direct. Unavoidable. Duna felt it land, deep, undeniable. Her chest tightened again, sharper this time. Not fear. Not exactly. Something closer to vulnerability than she had ever allowed herself to feel. That's not enough, she said, almost reflexively. Junkie didn't flinch. I know. A pause. Then, quieter. But it's real. That was what broke through. Not the words. Not the confession. But the certainty behind it. Duna's fingers curled slightly against his. Her voice was barely above a whisper now. I care about you too. The moment stretched. Shifted. Deepened. And suddenly, there was nothing left to negotiate. Nothing left to define. Just them. Junkie's gaze dropped briefly to her lips, then back to her eyes, giving her time. A choice. Duna noticed. Of course she did. She always noticed. For a second, instinct told her to pull back, to slow this down, to think. But thinking had never gotten her here. So this time, she didn't step away. Still terrible at this, she murmured, her voice softer now. Junkie's answer was just as quiet. Yes. And then, he closed the distance. The kiss wasn't rushed, wasn't overwhelming. It was careful, almost tentative at first, as if both of them were aware that this wasn't just a kiss. It was a line. Duna felt it immediately. That shift. That undeniable point of no return. For a brief second, she tensed. Old instincts. Old fears. Then, She didn't pull away. Her hand moved light. A why uncertain at first, resting against his shoulder, grounding herself, or maybe grounding him. The kiss deepened. Not urgent, but certain. And in that moment, there were no past betrayals, no expectations, no agreements waiting to break. Just this. Warm. Unfamiliar. Real. When they finally pulled back, neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Because for the first time, this wasn't something they were analyzing, or controlling, or trying to define. It was something they were feeling. And neither of them walked away. After the kiss, nothing fell apart. That, more than anything, surprised them. Duna had expected a shift into awkwardness, distance, regret maybe, but instead, there was quiet. Not empty, not uncertain, just calm. Junkie didn't move far when they pulled apart. Didn't rush to fill the silence with words. He stayed exactly where he was, close enough that she could still feel his presence without being overwhelmed by it. That mattered. More than she expected. We crossed it, she said finally. Yes. No clause for this. No. A pause. Then softer. No exit. Junkie held her gaze. Only if we decide one. Duna exhaled slowly. For once, that didn't feel like a trap. It felt like space. I don't want to end this, she admitted. The words came out steadier than she felt. Junkie didn't look surprised. I don't either. That should have been the hard part. But it wasn't. The hard part came next. Duna looked away briefly, gathering her thoughts. If we're doing this, she said, we can't treat it like before. No. No half-presence. No inconvenience. I understand. She turned back to him. You won't disappear into work. I won't. You'll tell me if something's wrong. I will. Feet. And you? He asked. Duna hesitated. That question felt heavier. Because her instinct had never been to disappear. It had been to shut down. To retreat quietly, without explanation. I won't run, she said. Not confidently, but honestly. Junkie nodded. That's enough. It wasn't a perfect promise. But it was real. The decision didn't feel dramatic. No declarations. No sudden intensity. Just a quiet, mutual understanding. They were choosing this. For real. And with that choice came something inevitable. You're still not staying here long-term, Duna said a few days later, leaning against her kitchen counter. Junkie, sitting at the table, looked up. No. Good. But... She narrowed her eyes slightly. But... It's inefficient. A pause. Then she sighed. You're serious? Yes. They had both avoided this topic before. It was in the original agreement. No required cohabitation. Distance meant control. Control meant safety. That no longer applied. I like my space, Duna said. I know. I need it. I know. She studied him carefully. You're still suggesting we live together. Yes. Why? Junkie didn't answer immediately. Not because he didn't know, but because this answer mattered. Because, he said slowly, I don't want this to feel separate from my life. Duna's expression shifted slightly. And it would? She asked. Yes. Feet. If I keep leaving every time. That made something in her chest tighten again. Not painfully. Just enough to make her aware of it. You're not good at gradual change, she murmured. I prefer clarity. That's obvious. She pushed off the counter, walking a few steps before stopping. Thinking. This was bigger than anything they had done so far. Bigger than the kiss. Bigger than the confession. Living together meant no distance. No reset button. No pretending this was temporary. If we do this, she said slowly, it's not reversible in the same way. I know. It'll change everything. Yes. She turned to face him fully. You're not allowed to treat it like a convenience. I won't. And I'm not going to adapt to your schedule like I'm fitting into your life. You won't, he said. We adjust both. Silence. But not uncertain. Measured. Duna looked at him for a long moment. Searching again. For hesitation. For doubt. There was none. You really are serious about this, she said. Yes. A breath. Slow. Steady. Then we do it properly. Junkie's gaze sharpened slightly. Define properly. Duna crossed her arms, but there was no defensiveness in it. Just thought. Not your place. Not mine. A pause. Somewhere new. That. He hadn't expected. Neutral ground, she added. We start from there. Junkie considered it. Then nodded. Agreed. It took a month. A surprisingly calm, practical month. They searched together. Discussed layouts, locations, distance to work. They disagreed. Quietly, logically. But never in a way that felt like conflict. More like building something. The day they got the keys, it didn't feel like a milestone. There were no grand gestures. No dramatic reactions. Just a door. A space. An empty apartment waiting to be filled. Duna stepped inside first. Looked around. Plain walls. Unfurnished. Quiet. It's very empty, she said. Yes. Junkie stepped in behind her. Closed the door. The sound echoed slightly. Soft. Final. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Duna turned slightly toward him. This is it. Yes. No agreements. No. No clauses. No. A pause. Just us. Junkie met her gaze. Steady. Certain. Just us. Something settled then. Not perfectly. Not completely. But enough. Duna let out a small breath. Then, without overthinking it, she reached for his hand. This time it wasn't tentative. Not uncertain. Just natural. Junkie held it without hesitation. And standing there, in the middle of something unfinished, undefined, and entirely real, they didn't feel like two people avoiding failure anymore. They felt like two people finally choosing something worth risking. Together.